Hey everyone, I'm Armor Gaming, welcome back to my channel and welcome to Monster Analysis. Up for analysis today is the Dark VIP monster, Nox the Condemned. The captain of the army of the soulless chooses his victims carefully, steals their souls with a quick swing of his scythe and condemns them to a life of emptiness. Nox is the Monster Legends Reaper, overall has a really great design, and as you're gonna see, his stats and skills really complement this monster's description. Nox has a power of 3,542, and currently in the game there are 31 Dark Legendary monsters, and with a power this high, it makes him tied for first place, along with General Nishians. His life on the other hand is 23,524, and this actually puts him near the very bottom. Of the 31 Dark Legendary monsters, this puts him in 26th place. As for his speed of 3,421, that is rather mediocre, putting him in 16th place, along with monsters like MMO Monster and Master Skill. So Nox has an incredible power, a rather poor life, and a mediocre speed. One thing to note about his life being so low is that it doesn't necessarily matter because this monster is an attacker, and typically when attackers have a really high power, they sacrifice that in their life. But that's okay because if you pair that monster up with a deny monster, you know, someone that can immobilize the enemy from attacking you, then you don't need to worry about your monster's low life because in a successful team, your monster shouldn't even be attacked. And like all VIP monsters, his trait is Bulwark. All status effects have a 50% less accuracy against all monsters of this unique cast. And being a dark monster, this is incredibly important considering the amount of monsters that can possess and the amount of monsters that can stun. And considering Nox is nowhere near being the fastest monster for dark legendary monsters, there are plenty of monsters that can possess, stun, and even Krampus who can freeze. So this is an amazing trait. Anyways, let's move on to his skills. We have Nox Scythe and Dark Scythe, and there's nothing particularly interesting about his default skills. As for his special, Dothas, deals moderate dark damage to all enemies, all targets will die after 4 turns. So it's an AoE dark based attack that deals a modest 45 damage, and this applies Fatal Countdown, which you probably recognize from Metalhead. All enemies will die after 4 turns. Now in my opinion, this isn't necessarily the best skill to give an attacker. Normally an attacker will have like a 70 damage AoE, 75, maybe even 90, and realistically any monster that faces Nox probably won't even be alive past 1 or 2 turns. So even if you were to start off with his ultimate skill, realistically no enemy monster would be alive to die from Fatal Countdown. However, I shouldn't discount it right away because there are cases where it might come in handy against a really extremely tanky monster. This might come in handy, but at the same time keep in mind he has the highest power for dark monsters, and as you're gonna see, he has some really amazing strong skills. So overall, I'm not the biggest fan of his ultimate skill. And really quickly, let's breathe through skills group 1. We have Nightmare Rip, Horror Scythe, Abducted Life. From skills group 1, there's nothing worth running, so let's move on to skills group 2. We start things off with Deadly Rip, deals very heavy dark damage, low chance of killing enemy instantly, requires cooldown. This skill targets a single enemy, taking away 60 damage, costing 28 stamina, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. A nice extra little bonus about this skill is that it gives you an instant kill chance. So you have a 2% chance to kill a boss instantly, and you have an 8% chance to kill regular enemies instantly. So the odds of this skill actually killing an enemy instantly, it's incredibly low. 8 out of every 100 times you use this skill, you will be killing an enemy monster. But even without the instant kill chance, with this monster's power and the damage of this skill, and high enough level runes, this skill might be strong enough to one-hit most enemy monsters. And for this skill, I actually do like that it deals dark damage, because you're gonna see this is the only skill that's actually dark based besides the skill from skills group 1, which means this skill can come in handy if you're going up against earth monsters, monsters like General Atum, monsters like Oros, and at the end of the day, you never know, you might get extremely lucky and land that instant kill. I personally would choose to run this skill. Next we have Incubus Scythes. Deals little special damage to all enemies, may give nightmares to all targets, requires cooldown. This skill is an AoE dealing 30 damage, costing 34 stamina with a 3-turn cooldown, and it gives nightmares to all of the enemy monsters. Now if you're making Nox the Condemned for pure offensive purposes, this is another skill you might want to consider running, and I'm actually going to come back to this skill once I discuss a future skill from skills group 3. The final skills group 2 skill is called Dead Vision. Extracts 75% of enemies maximum life. Nox also loses 75% of his maximum life, requires cooldown. So this skill deals no damage, costs 28 stamina, has a 5-turn cooldown, and ultimately both Nox and the enemy he targets will both lose 75% of their max life. This can be extremely useful in adventure map going up against bosses, especially if you pair him up with someone like Timerion who can do cooldowns deactivated, and maybe someone like General Alsis who can recover Nox to his full life. That way Nox can do Dead Vision back to back, stay alive, and kill the enemy boss. Or a different combo if you have Nox and MMO Monster. MMO Monster can take away 30% of the enemy's max life, and Nox can take away 75% of his max life, which equals 105%, so that'll also kill an enemy boss. So this skill is really good for adventure map. It's also good if you're going up against really tanky monsters, but at the same time, this monster is an attacker. You're going to want to give him strength runes, and as you can see, this skill doesn't deal any damage. This skill relies primarily on percentage, so even if he was to have 3 level 10 strength runes, at the end of the day, he's still only going to be taking away 75% of an enemy's max health. So if you're planning on using Nox for player versus player or team wars, I really wouldn't recommend running Dead Vision. Obliteration. If you're planning on using him for adventure map and really want to combo him with MMO monster, then it could come in handy, but this is a VIP monster that you have to pay real money for, so I personally wouldn't recommend using this monster for adventure map. Nonetheless, you can if you want to. In skills group 3, we have a skill called Torment Rip. Deals massive special damage, may make target bleed, requires cooldown. Targets a single enemy for 75 damage, costs 33 stamina, and it only has a 1 turn cooldown. Now this is an amazing skill for several reasons. For one, it deals massive special damage. The keyword here is special. So particularly in Team Wars, this monster will have no trouble taking out the enemy dark monster in one hit. And on top of that, even if that monster was to stay alive, it would give that monster bleed, which means they lose 10% of their health for the following 4 turns, and their power is down by 20%. Not to mention the extremely low cooldown of 1 turn. And this skill will also come in handy if you're going up against extremely tanky monsters like earth monsters, so you can start off with Torment Rip, make the enemy monster bleed, which will really help to cut away at the enemy's health. And one thing I noticed just now, if you were to do Torment Rip and follow it up with Dead Vision, that'd probably be enough to kill the tankiest of tanks, because that initial damage from Torment Rip, that 75 damage, combined with the 10% of life the enemy is going to lose with bleeding, combined with Dead Vision which takes away 75% of the enemy's max health, together Dead Vision and bleed is 85%, so if the initial damage from Torrent Rip can account for the other 15%, that can be a deadly combination to get rid of the tankiest enemy monster. Still, even though you can do that, I'm not entirely convinced that it's worth running Dead Vision. Anyways, Torment Rip, definitely a really good skill. And next we have an incredibly unique skill, Total Obliteration. Deals insane special damage to all allies and all enemies. Allies receive less damage if the attack doesn't hit all enemies, requires cooldown. It's an AoE skill, dealing 80 damage, costing 37 stamina with a 4 turn cooldown. Except this skill doesn't only attack all of the enemies, it also attacks all of your allies, so this can be extremely detrimental in Team War. Now if you were to use Nox the Condemned in something like player versus player, this isn't that bad because you can partner him up with Timerion, who can do space time, which will ultimately save your whole team, and you're just going to be dealing out an 80 damage AoE to the enemy monsters, which is an extremely easy victory. Again, to remind everyone, this monster has the highest power for dark legendary monsters. So as far as player versus player and clearing dungeons really fast, Nox the Condemned can be a go-to monster. I also feel that Total Obliteration makes it so Nox the Condemned can be a really good monster on defense for Team Wars, because Total Obliteration deals insane damage to all monsters on the field. If the AI was to use this skill, and let's say even if you were possessed, it doesn't matter, you're still going to be attacking your allies and the enemy monsters, so the AI has a really good chance of winning. But let's just talk about one more skill. Abducted Soul. Kills an ally, gains double damage and double life during 2 turns, gains an extra turn, requires cooldown. So this is a self buff skill that also kills one of your allies. It costs 33 stamina and has a 3 turn cooldown, you gain double life, double damage, and extra turn. The downfall to this skill again is that you kill one of your allies. Now again, for something like player versus player, that doesn't really matter if you lose one of your monsters. And in fact, you could probably protect that monster again using Timerion. If you run Timerion and you do space time and do Abducted Soul, the monster you choose to kill isn't going to be killed because of space time. And then if you follow that up with Total Obliteration, well again, your team is protected, not Nox the Condemned because his space time would wear off, but then you're dealing out an 80 damage AoE on the enemy monster team, and you're actually going to be dealing double damage. So that is definitely going to obliterate them. So for something like player versus player, Nox the Condemned is possibly the best monster for dealing out spread damage. But let's go back to talking about this monster in the context of Team Wars. I've seen a few people say that this monster isn't usable in Team Wars in terms of offense. I don't necessarily agree with that. And in terms of defense, I do agree with people that this monster is one of the best monsters to put on your defense team. Keep in mind that lots of Dark Deny monsters can stun, possess, or in terms of Krampus, can freeze. Because this monster has Bulwark, there's a 50% chance he won't be affected by any of those. But let's talk about possession real quick. Let's say Nox the Condemned was to get possessed, and when he's possessed, let's say he was to do Abducted Soul. Because he's possessed, he's going to be killing one of your allies, not one of his own teammates. And then if he follows it up with something like Torment Rip, he's going to have double damage, so that is probably going to be killing whatever monster you have. But let's say you gave him a 2-turn possession with someone like Lily. Well, if let's say he was to do Total Obliteration, in that case, it doesn't matter whether he was possessed or not, this is going to be killing like every single monster on the field, and ultimately the AI is going to win. So definitely a good monster to put on defense. In terms of offense, I don't think he's useless. I get why people don't like him though. Because Abducted Soul ultimately kills one of your allies, that means you're going to miss out on one war coin. You're trying to maximize the amount of war coins you get. And my main argument to that is that there have been so many Team Wars I've been a part of where I know for a fact that my common, my uncommon, my rare, no matter what I do, they're going to die. And that's just due to the simple nature that most deny monsters can successfully deny the whole enemy team for 1 turn. The enemy attacker, if it manages to land 1 hit on my common, uncommon, or rare, it can possibly take them out. Or even if the enemy deny monster does an AoE, that's probably strong enough to take out my common or my uncommon. So for the majority of players that aren't extremely competitive, we go into a lot of wars knowing that we're going to lose 1 monster, that we're only going to win 2 coins. So if that's the case and you're using Nox the Condemned, you might as well sacrifice your own common, uncommon, rare, and give yourself that boost and wipe out the enemy in 1 or 2 turns. However, if you're a more competitive player, I can totally see the reason why you don't want to use this monster in Team Wars. There's significantly better choices. Razul, Barbatos, there are so many better dark attackers that after you successfully deny the enemy monster, they can wipe out the enemy in just 1 turn. So it ultimately boils down to an individual basis. You have to look at your past experience in Team Wars involving dark monsters, and you have to see how many of those you successfully won with 3 coins, how many wars did you win with only 2 coins, and then it's up to you to decide whether or not to use Nox the Condemned in terms of offense. Because if you just ignore Abducted Soul and you look at his other skills, 75 damage single hit, 60 damage single hit, he's still a really strong monster, but he becomes even more powerful when you give him the double damage. Now, as for what skill set is the best for this monster, I personally like all of skills group 3, Torment Rip, Total Obliteration, Abducted Soul, and from skills group 2, I like Deadly Rip, and that's mostly because I would like to have one dark based attack in case I went up against earth monsters. I can see some people wanting to use Incubus Scythes instead of Deadly Rip, and that would combo with Abducted Soul. After you sacrifice your monster, you gave yourself double damage, you do Incubus Scythes, and you'd be pretty much using Nox the Condemned as Barbatos. With enough strength runes given this monster's power, given the double damage boost, it would be enough to wipe out all of the enemy monsters, and this would especially come in handy for things like dungeons, for things like player versus player. However, once again, for player versus player and clearing dungeons really fast, you can just do Total Obliteration, but it's ultimately up to you. My recommended once again is skills group 3 and Deadly Rip. However, you're free to choose Incubus Scythes instead of Deadly Rip if you want to. As for what runes to run on Nox the Condemned, don't even bother with giving him a life rune, give him 2 strength runes and a speed rune. And with all that being said, that is going to conclude my analysis on Nox the Condemned. Overall, I think he's a really good monster. I definitely think he's worthy of being a VIP monster. Do I recommend buying him? I can never answer that question successfully because at the end of the day, it ultimately comes up with what do you want? Do you actually want to spend money on this game? If you're already used to spending money on this game, then yeah, he's definitely a good monster. But if you're a free-to-play player, then don't worry, there are plenty of good dark monsters. Barbatos and Razul are 2 attackers that come to mind that are extremely amazing. So don't feel bad if you can't get this monster because you don't want to buy him. And I'm really going to emphasize this point to everyone who's going to ask me, is this monster worth spending money on? That is ultimately your decision. You have to listen to this analysis and decide for yourselves. And now I want to hear from all of you. Do you think this monster is good? Do you think this monster is worth it? Do you think this monster is better than Barbatos? Do you think he's better than Razul? Of those 3 monsters, who do you think is the best? Please be sure to let me know in the comments below, and also be sure to let me know who you want me to analyze next. With all that being said, I hope all of you have a great amazing day or a great amazing night. Remember to dream big and pursue your passions.